if it's going to be physical and you're gonna allow us to be physical, then allow both teams to be physical. If you're going to call the holds and you're going to call the chucks, and you're going to then call it both ways.
Picture this. Your team fights back from 17 points down, your star player drops 24 points while playing completely out of position, and you're one shot away from a statement victory. Then the referees make calls so questionable that your normally composed center loses her absolute mind on national television. That's exactly what happened when Aaliyah Boston went nuclear after the Indiana Fever's devastating 81-80 loss to the Dallas Wings. And what she said afterward will shock you. The sight of Caitlin Clark physically restraining her teammate while Boston screamed at the officials became an instant viral moment. But the real story goes much deeper than one heated exchange. This wasn't just about bad calls. It was the culmination of a perfect storm that nearly destroyed the Fever's playoff dreams in the most heartbreaking way possible. Just days before facing Dallas, the Fever experienced what can only be described as a nightmare scenario. In a single game against Phoenix, their entire point guard depth chart disappeared in the most brutal fashion imaginable. Sydney Colson, one of their floor generals, went down with a torn ACL in the first quarter. Then, as if the basketball gods hadn't inflicted enough pain, Aari McDonald fractured a bone in her right foot during the fourth quarter of that same game. Both injuries were season-ending. In one night, Indiana lost two players who were supposed to control the pace, run the offense, and handle full-court pressure. But here's the kicker. Caitlin Clark was already sidelined with a groin injury she'd been dealing with since July. That meant the Fever suddenly had zero healthy point guards for the first time all season. Think about that for a second. No regular ball handlers, no one to break defensive pressure, no one to the sets this roster was specifically built to execute. The front office scrambled to sign veteran Odyssey Sims to a hardship contract, but she had less than 24 hours to learn the playbook before being thrown into the fire against Dallas. With their backcourt in shambles, one player had no choice but to carry a load that would crush most athletes. Kelsey Mitchell, known as their most dangerous pure scorer, suddenly found herself responsible for running the entire offense from start to finish. This wasn't just an adjustment, it completely changed the physical and mental demands of her game. Normally, Mitchell catches the ball in scoring position, not dribbling it up through traps or orchestrating half-court sets. But against Dallas, she was the only realistic option to initiate offense, and the Wings knew it. They sent constant pressure, using traps and quick doubles to make every advance up the floor a battle. Every possession started in her hands against schemes specifically designed to drain her energy. The numbers tell an incredible story. Mitchell finished with 24 points on efficient 7 of 15 shooting, including 4 3-pointers and 6 rebounds. But those stats came while she was essentially playing two positions simultaneously, point guard and primary scorer, against a defense that keyed on her every move. What makes her performance even more remarkable is what happened in the fourth quarter. Down double digits with the game slipping away, Mitchell buried a deep three from several feet beyond the arc, then immediately motioned to her teammates to lock down defensively. Moments later, she threaded a perfect pass to Boston in the pick and roll for an easy 2. These weren't just scoring plays, they were leadership moments from someone playing the most demanding role imaginable. While Mitchell carried the heaviest load, she wasn't fighting alone. The role players who stepped up in this game deserve serious recognition for refusing to let the deficit become a death sentence. Sophie Cunningham was absolutely relentless, dropping 14 points on solid shooting and drilling 2 crucial 3-pointers that brought the crowd back into it. Every make came with her trademark intensity, diving for loose balls, jawing after contact, and showing the competitive fire that her coach would praise after the game. Chloe Bibby made the most of limited minutes, scoring 11 points in just 12 minutes while hitting all 3 of her attempts from deep. One of those daggers came during a critical Dallas push that threatened to stretch the lead into double figures in the fourth quarter, forcing the Wings into a timeout they desperately wanted to save. In the paint, Natasha Howard anchored everything with a 12-point, 12-rebound double-double and 3 blocks. She erased potential layups and ended Dallas possessions before they could get second-chance points. Her presence meant the Wings had to work for everything inside, giving Indiana the stability they needed to mount their comeback. Boston herself battled through heavy contact on nearly every possession, finishing with 14 points and providing crucial interior scoring when the outside shots weren't falling. Her willingness to fight in the post kept Dallas from pulling away earlier and created offensive balance when the perimeter game stalled. The fourth quarter numbers are absolutely staggering. Indiana outscored Dallas 25-4 in that final frame, earning themselves a legitimate shot to win despite missing their entire point guard rotation. This wasn't one player going supernova, it was everyone doing exactly what the moment demanded. The comeback set up what should have been a statement victory, but the closing sequences turned into a masterclass in how games slip away. With 11.7 seconds left, the Fever secured a defensive rebound while trailing by 1. They had their last timeout available and a chance to draw up the perfect play. Instead, they chose to push the ball in transition. Mitchell ended up taking a tightly contested jumper that missed, and Dallas grabbed the rebound. By the time Coach Stephanie White called timeout, only 1.7 seconds remained on the clock. Far too late to design anything meaningful. White's post-game admission was telling, "I probably should have used it at the 3-second mark." It's rare to hear a coach publicly own a tactical mistake in such a critical moment, but that split-second hesitation was exactly the kind of detail that can decide a season's trajectory. The clock management disaster stung, but it wasn't the only reason players and fans were furious. The officiating throughout the game had been so consistently questionable that tempers were already at a boiling point. One sequence in particular had everyone seeing red. Boston was fighting for position under the rim when the Dallas center clearly clamped her arm, holding it down to prevent any movement. Instead of calling a hold or foul on Dallas, the officials whistled Boston. The call stood after review, drawing shocked commentary from broadcaster Rebecca Lobo, who openly said she expected it to be overturned. The replay was damning. You could see Boston's arm being pinned down while she literally couldn't move, yet somehow she got called for the foul. It was the kind of call that makes you question what the referees were actually watching. Then there was the flagrant foul inconsistency that had both teams confused. Sophie Cunningham got hit with a flagrant for a closeout on Paige Beckers after review, but earlier in the game, Beckers herself had received a flagrant on a similar landing space play. The problem? Mitchell later absorbed almost For Indiana, this wasn't just frustrating, it was altering possessions in ways that directly swung momentum. When calls are that inconsistent, players start second-guessing their instincts, and the flow of the game gets completely disrupted. Another sequence showed Buchers shoving Cunningham with both hands, pushing her completely off balance and into Natasha Howard. Despite the clear contact, Cunningham somehow got called for the foul while Buchers stood wide open waiting for a pass as if nothing happened. The emotional toll was building throughout the game, and it finally erupted in the most dramatic way possible. Boston's frustration reached a breaking point during a heated exchange with officials. Her anger so intense that Caitlin Clark, still sidelined with her groin injury, had to physically intervene to calm her teammate down. The sight of Clark putting a restraining hand on Boston while the center gestured angrily at the referees became an instant social media moment. Even from the bench, Clark was trying to prevent the situation from escalating further, showing the kind of leadership that goes beyond statistics. Sophie Cunningham also hit her boiling point after being shoved by Buchers, immediately reacting with a clearly audible "God damn it" before walking away. The raw emotion was visible to everyone watching, and Cunningham would later apologize publicly for her outburst while still standing by the point she was making about the officiating. Even Clark, despite being injured, joined the silent protest by clapping forcefully in the direction of referee Amy Bonner after the final buzzer. It was a subtle but unmistakable show of solidarity with her teammates' frustration. If you thought the players' reactions were intense, wait until you hear what Coach Stephanie White said in the post-game press conference. She didn't hold back, delivering some of the most scathing criticism of WNBA officiating you'll ever hear from a head coach. "Kelsey Mitchell is held or chucked on every freaking possession and never gets a call off the ball," White said bluntly. Then she dropped this bombshell about Boston. "I think Aaliyah Boston is the worst officiated post player in the league. She never gets a call." White wasn't done. She continued, "There's a double standard there. If it's going to be physical and you're going to allow us to be physical, then allow both teams to be physical. If you're going to call the holds and call the chucks, then call it both ways." The coach's frustration was palpable as she added, "I think we've been pretty consistent in what we're asking for, and I didn't feel like it was consistent, especially for those two. You could call a foul every time down the floor for those two." These aren't the typical diplomatic comments you usually hear. When reporters asked Boston about the team's offensive struggles, her response was as economical as it was loaded with meaning. "We need better focus," she said simply, but those 4 words carried the weight of everything that had just happened. It read 2 ways. Part self-critique about the team's execution, part reflection on a night where external chaos had thrown them completely off rhythm. That dual meaning captured the delicate balance between acknowledging what they could control and calling out what they absolutely could not. The fact that Boston, normally one of the more composed players in the league, had been so visibly upset during the game made her measured post-game comments even more significant. She was clearly choosing her words carefully, but the subtext was unmistakable. This loss wasn't just devastating because of how it happened, it was crushing because of what it meant for Indiana's playoff positioning. Dallas entered the game as a bottom 3 team, more concerned with draft positioning than playoff impact. The Fever needed this win to steady themselves in the standings, and instead watched their playoff seeding take a significant hit. The defeat dropped them to 18-15 and 6th in the standings, tightening the postseason race with only a handful of games remaining. Every remaining matchup now carries enormous pressure, and the margin for error has essentially disappeared. Some voices have called for White's job after this loss, but that criticism ignores the context of what she's dealing with. She's navigated a roster absolutely shredded by injuries, while still keeping the team in legitimate playoff contention. The players themselves have repeatedly praised the group's resilience and growth under her leadership. Whether this moment becomes a rallying point or just another missed opportunity will depend entirely on how the team responds. They've already proven they can fight their way into playoff position despite a gutted backcourt and an impossibly thin rotation. The Fever now face a critical juncture in their season. Caitlin Clark is still rehabbing her groin injury and hasn't returned to practice, though the team expects her back within weeks. Her return can't come soon enough because the current situation is simply unsustainable. Asking Kelsey Mitchell to carry both the scoring and playmaking load while role players battle through inconsistent officiating is a recipe for burnout. The emergency signing of Odyssey Sims helps, but she needs time to build chemistry and learn the system properly. The real question is whether the WNBA will address the officiating concerns that have now been publicly called out by a head coach in the most direct terms possible. When a coach is willing to risk fines and
The controversy has sparked league-wide discussions about officiating consistency and whether certain players receive different treatment based on their reputation or market appeal. Boston's situation has become a symbol of a broader issue that extends far beyond just the Fever's playoff hopes. For now, Indiana must channel their frustration into fuel for the remaining games. They've shown they can overcome incredible adversity, but late-game execution and controversial calls cost them a winnable game that could haunt their playoff positioning. The sight of Boston's fury, Clark's intervention, and White's explosive comments will be remembered long after this season ends. Whether it becomes the moment that galvanized a championship run or marked the beginning of the end for their playoff dreams remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, this controversy has exposed issues that the WNBA can no longer ignore.